is that you look at the conditions in a particular country, and particularly issues where, societies are broken down, where it's going to be a danger, and they can get temporary refuge in the United States. And so, in terms of the legislation, you cannot overrule the discretion of the secretary, and in this case, the Secretary of Homeland Security. But what the lawsuit was about was that she did not exercise her discretion in an appropriate manner. One being that there was evidence that she really didn't do the analysis to see whether or not that the conditions on the ground justified individuals coming here. There was very short, shrift in terms of that, in terms of just a basic email saying, hey, we're not, going to host these individuals. And the second thing that was raised in the litigation, which really should be deeply troubling to, your listeners and all lawyers, in my view, is the claim that the administration exercises discretion in a discriminatory manner. And so the claim basically was that, because the president made these unfounded claims about Springfield, Ohio, which is about an hour north of where my wife grew up in Dayton, Ohio. And then juxtaposed to that, you had the administration saying that, hey, we wish there was more immigration, from good countries and not, S-hole countries. And the S-hole countries they refer to were countries where, the people are black. And the people that the administration, the president referred to as being desirable, were Nordic countries that were, almost exclusively white. And so the question presented, and I think, I recommend your audience look at Justice Kagan's dissent. They said, how can you basically say as a matter of law that this is discriminatory? And then Justice Alito, which should give us all pause, especially when we look at, this court looking at civil rights cases and discrimination standards, he basically had the gall to say that this was not enough to prove discrimination and just really threw it away. And said, okay, let's just keep it moving. And that's really problematic, no matter what your politics are, to indicate that it's not, enough for someone to basically, indicate, hey, that the worst stereotypes that are unfounded exist regarding a population, then juxtaposed to, statements that, hey, we don't want people from black countries, but we want people from white countries. If that's not enough, it really should give us pause about, how this court's going to lead us as it relates to interpreting discrimination laws. So it really is a sad day, but I really, just want to encourage, our, justices, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Ketanji Brown Jackson to really, continue these strong dissents because it's a historical record in terms of, how low the court has gone.
Hey, let's talk to our prosecutor real quickly because I'm concerned about this. Hey, Prosecutor Mears, with this decision, do you anticipate that there's going to be a lot of ICE intervention, be picking up the Haitians and trying to deport them?
Well, I think it certainly serves as a way to encourage ICE and local law enforcement to potentially cooperate and collaborate and be aggressive on these sorts of cases. The other thing that I would just point out is it's not only this decision, but both Kavanaugh and Alito have indicated that they certainly believe that pulling someone over basically based on their appearance and potentially based on how they talk is sufficient and would pass constitutional muster. So it's not only that we have like these overarching policy choices that the administration's making and the Supreme Court seems to be willing to endorse, but in terms of how they're going to execute those policy decisions, really flies in the face of what I grew up learning, which were fundamental rights to all of us, meaning that you had to have reasonable suspicion. There had to be a real basis to pull somebody over. And the Supreme Court, through Alito and Kavanaugh, have pretty much indicated that, no, they don't think that is necessary. And you really can pull someone over based on how they look or how they talk or how they sound, which is a striking departure from where the law is right now. So to me, I think you have to read those two opinions together with one another. because it's not only the policy goal of the Trump administration. The Supreme Court's also given them the tools to carry this out in a way that I believe tramples all over people's constitutional rights.
Well, here's my problem. And lawyers, we're dealing with this issue, and it's going to affect people in the community. Like, for example, even if we sue someone, say from Mexico, for Haiti, or represent them either way, what has occurred that is disturbing is that, like, we sue one individual from Mexico and they deported him, and record of him going back to Mexico or any place else. Now, why that's important? Well, we want to get insurance information and things like that. But you lost the ability now to track down evidence from a person who may want to cooperate, but they can't because they immediately placed in custody, and then there's no record as to where they're being shipped. And so I'm concerned about that. So if they're deporting these folks, where are they taking them to? And so I don't know. I just kind of wish that there would be a stronger pushback, particularly from our elected politician on this issue.
Well,
One other thing I want to make clear too, because a couple of folks they confronted me in the grocery store. Here's the deal: immigrants pay taxes whether they're American citizens or not, but they get no benefits from the American government. They don't get food stamp. They don't get Social Security. They don't get retirement. They don't get health care. In fact, in Indiana, what our governor did that was extra cruel is that in the past, immigrants could get the state-sponsored insurance, and it included things for surgery and things like that. Well, the governor changed the rule that say they can only get emergency medical care. So we have people that are injured that need to have surgeries. They can't get it done now because they took that coverage away from them. So now we have a situation whereby the government is eradicating the rights of citizens. Even American citizens are impacted by these draconian decisions. But go ahead.
May I say this? We never had a real full protection of the rights of Black people here in this country, but we were closing in on getting some requirement of probable cause. Give me a reasonable suspicion that police would have to assert. But now it seems as though that's going to be broadened in that we thought they were Haitians, or we thought they were illegal Haitians, and that scope is going to be broadened. And I sense, as a practical matter, going to be many African Americans approached, arrested, and killed behind this broader spectrum that's now existing for stuff.
And Attorney Grimes, that's why this is so concerning to me, is because you can now pull or attempt to pull someone over for just speculation.
Right.
I mean, you don't need anything other than just, hey, I'm speculating this person potentially could be illegal. And the Supreme Court has indicated a willingness to endorse that type of behavior. And that, to me, is incredibly problematic and impacts everybody in this community, because there's a lot of people who can now be pulled over by law enforcement, not because they did anything wrong, not even because law enforcement thinks they're doing anything wrong, but because you look like someone who they potentially say could be a Haitian immigrant.
Based on the color of your skin.
Right. That should be appalling to everybody out there and shock everybody's conscience. Yet when you look at the Supreme Court, they seem like that's an okay way to operate.
Well, the other problem that presents is that if there's this wide lane in terms of stopping people, it's going to lead to individuals being unjustly charged. And the problem that we have in our society is that, we do not have enough lawyers to represent those that can't afford it. And so it's going to cause more people to, plea that probably, should have fought it, but did not have the means of doing so. The other thing that I think that's really interesting that your audience, Nathaniel, should take, advantage of, or at least understand, is at the same time, as a prosecutor indicated, that the court is indicating a willingness to be able to pull someone over because of race or because of their accent. At the same time, they're basically saying that, hey, you can't take race into consideration, even if it's to, remedy past discrimination. So it's really not an even-handed, view, in my view, of this really important issue and something that we should all be concerned about. So it's going to be important in terms of this next election. There are many people talking about some reforms for the Supreme Court in terms of ethics reform or adding, more justices to the court. It's something that we should probably consider when we look at some of these very unusual decisions.
We were looking at the Hispanic race to a degree and empathizing with them for being pulled over, and based upon their look, their appearance, their skin complexion, and their hair. I was at a new Jamaican restaurant about 2 weeks ago, but I can imagine there's a concern for the patrons of that restaurant. We have a sizable Haitian community here in Los Angeles County, and we have a sizable Jamaican community. We have a sizable African community. There's going to be a problem in those communities.
Sad. Well, Imhotep, you have a question or comments today about this issue, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. And good morning to everyone. Thank you for taking my call, Brother Nate. I mean, it's the only time we can get some really balanced legal opinion. And hello to everyone across the years. I definitely want to give you a special hello to. I always appreciate seeing you next community meeting. I'll definitely be there. If you run again, definitely got my vote. I don't like what's going on locally. Nate, maybe you can get into that later with him. But you are a complete advocate and a person we love in this community. A couple of things I want to hit on real quick, and then you guys can comment. The SCOTUS ruling, the ruling. SCOTUS is schizophrenic or something. SCOTUS has sat here and ruled against a Rastafarian in prison. I think it was in Louisiana. He was just to get out in 5 months. And the guards cut his hair, cut his dreads off. He already had subsequent rulings. He already had paperwork that his hair was appropriate under the Religious Freedom Act. Yet they ruled against him and said that the guards were okay. Seems like they only rule unless you're a white Christian, like they did for bakers and the other people and stuff like that. It's beyond any type of thought. This is the communication I've been trying to have on Sunday on Cameron Riddle's show with people around here, especially black people. Milton, I want you to understand this. Milton, really, we have a large percentage of black Christians in this country, in this world, who don't see anybody else outside the box. They're actually atheists to any other religion. They're actually atheists. When we should be respecting the exercise of everyone's beliefs, they don't do it. I was wearing a kufi a couple of weeks ago, and a neighbor of mine who's a good dude said, "What are you doing with that Muslim hat on?" I had to remind him this is an African kufi. Oh. So even then, we have percentage of our people who are even racist against Muslims, black people. And then the Monsanto decision, that was terrible.
Hey, wait a second. Hold on a second. Imhotep, you say that there were black folks racist against black folk for wearing what do you say?
I had a kufi on the other day. That's an African kufi. It's out of Nigeria. It's a kufi, kente. And a neighbor of mine who's a good dude said that, "What are you doing with that Muslim hat on?" I said, "It's not a Muslim hat. It's a kufi." He didn't know what a kufi is. See, we have a lack of education. We have religious bondage from people here, and we have, to be honest, black people have bought into this cultural religious war with these white conservatives from a religious standpoint, and it served us none but our detriment. And you can comment on that more. The Monsanto decision, that was terrible, because you claim you want to override abortion and save and protect children, this and the third, yet you allow these poisons and the chemicals to come back in the food that's going to hurt people. Thirdly, Texas Lieutenant Governor Patrick saying yesterday at the White House, standing behind Trump, that the Constitution does not explicitly say that there is a separation of church and state. Reason why he brought that up, because Texas just mandatorily put Bible in the schools and are going to try to make children read Bible passages. And even Raphael Warnock on Bill Maher's show last night said he's a Christian pastor, but he doesn't want to live in anybody's theocracy. So we're going down that slippery road. And then the protesters getting more time in Texas than the January 6th traitors. Amy Cohen Barrett adopted 2 Haitian children. Amy Cohen Barrett, the Supreme Court justice, adopted 2 Haitian children and yet ruled against Haitian people, man. This is crazy. Milton, is Derek's still open in Inglewood? Derek's Jamaican restaurant still open in Inglewood? I love Derek's. When I used to come out there, I don't know if I didn't get out there last year and check if he was still open.
I believe
But
so.
is
I went
Derek's
to
still
the new
open?
one
Great
down
place.
on Slauson.
Pardon?
I went to the new one down on Slauson, but I believe the one
He got a new one? Oh, he got a new one. Man, that's one of the best
got
places
an
I've ever
additional
ate.
one. Additional.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Wow. So
I understand
in a
his
nutshell,
thinking.
with this abrogation of rights, I mean, what's the remedy? I mean, this is so devastating. I don't think people realize that the way these decisions are coming out. I mean, where are we headed with these decisions? This is crazy stuff that we all know. We saw the calamity and the destruction by gang members in Haiti, and ironically, I didn't see us render the type of assistance to that unstable government I thought that we should have done,
All right.
you know, to help out. And because the world is universal now. Bullet fired in one part of the world affects another part of the world. And we see that now, particularly with this war with Iran, that, you know, everything we do has a consequence. And so I thought that it was a great humanitarian type gesture to bring the Haitians in and give them a chance to have quality of life that they couldn't experience in their country. And that's kind of the way we did it. But
Well,
one final question. Pierre, you have a quick question, then we're going to go on to this curfew law. Go ahead, Pierre. Pierre? Hello?
Are you there?
Yes, go ahead.
Are you
sir.
there?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Hey, before we get started, what
what
are
I
you
wanted
doing
to
to make
bring
sure
up-
people get out? Hey, Pierre, what are you doing yourself to make
Yeah.
sure people get out to vote this fall?
What am I doing about voting?
Yes.
Oh, well, you know, Pierre always votes, and I'm
No,
not
what you
doing a
doing
whole
to get-
lot. Other,
I mean, what are you doing to get other people to vote this fall?
to be honest with you, Nate, I'm not doing anything. Pierre's got a whole lot of things, got a whole lot of irons in the fire, and I'm just trying to take care of myself and stay in my lane. You know, people got to wake up, bottom line. But what I wanted to bring up to you guys, got all these attorneys on here, got the Marion County prosecutor. One, Nate, and this is something good for Milton. Anthony Bailey, a 61-year-old bus driver here out of prison after 27 years. Our United States attorney wants to send him back to prison because the Supreme Court said that this ruling didn't apply to the Supreme Court ruling that says folks can get out of prison who was sentenced too long or whatever, something or other, didn't apply to Anthony Bailey's case. Now, here's a guy that's been out of prison after 27 years, got him a good bus driving job. Now they want to send him back to prison. And our United States attorney, and get this, Milton, they didn't even mention the guy's name in the newspaper. That's how strong and powerful these people are. Didn't even mention the U.S. attorney's name in the newspaper. But, you know, Thomas Wheeler, and I want to say this for myself, because you guys are lawyers and you've been there, you've seen this stuff. This is the U.S. attorney that we have here in Indianapolis that's been sitting on a complaint that I filed, a criminal complaint that I filed against 2 federal judges. And he won't forward it to the Department of Justice or anything, you know? And it seems like this new judge that I got on my case, Nate, that just got confirmed in February, seems like the magistrate judge in my case knew that this guy was going to be on my case back in December. And I'm trying to figure out how she might have known that. It's incredible what goes on in this country. The rule of law has just been lost. And I need all you attorneys to keep an eye on me, keep an eye on old Pierre, because we've got some dangerous people here in this city, in Indianapolis, and a dangerous United States attorney. And so that's where I'm at, Nate. But I'm not helping anybody vote or anything. Pierre just trying to hang on and do the best that he can.
Let me
I
just
want to thank you for taking my call.
I want to just try to address Nathaniel's question. What about this? Dealing with the Rastafari guy, he'd been growing his dreads for 20 years. If you can imagine how that man felt about his hair. 20 years of dread growing. I can just imagine the length of his dreadlocks. And now he's bald headed. That was his religion. But Nathan, I learned that there's a thing in prison called, and I hope that Marlon will share with us his insight to this if he knows about it as a prosecutor, called the diesel therapy. And that is when a person complains about some treatment or ruling against them in an institution, they sometimes put them in diesel therapy. And that is they transport you from facility to facility around the country for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And by the time your family or your loved ones or your lawyer catch up with where you are, you're at another facility. And they will do that for a year or whatever time. That's an inside and internal belief by a lot of inmates and pointed out by examples. So what do? I don't know what you do unless you have an overall uproar against the system. You can consider that to be whatever you want.
Well, I
Okay,
think what, go ahead. You go ahead.
go ahead, Marlon.
Yeah, I think what we can do is that, we're not powerless. I remember at the last election, a number of people, particularly people of color and progressives, were saying, hey, I'm going to vote the couch, and it doesn't make a difference, whether I voted for Kamala Harris or President Trump. And this is proof positive that elections are, have consequences. So I think it's really important for us to really educate people that voting the couch is not an option, not voting at all. And I think also when we talk about a judicial system, many of these judges come up through the state system. They're state court judges. And, and I hear a lot of people, they'll go in and vote and they'll skip all judicial races. There are so much information out there, from, those of us that are working in the front lines on these cases. And there have been bar associations, particularly in Ohio, that have rating systems that really talk about their experiences with a number of these, state judges that, are future federal district court judges. So those are things that we should really, provide information about. And I would encourage, more states to do those ratings, nonpartisan ratings in terms of, how these judges are performing. Have they been reversed over and over and over again? Are they following the law? Are they treating people with respect? I mean, these are important things that really go to the heart of our justice system, in my view.
Okay, now changing the subject. This is something near and dear to me. That is that in Indianapolis, in most American cities, we have a crime problem, particularly with youth. And the city of Indianapolis decided to do something about it. And so I had the prosecutor on today. I need to deal with this because it's such an important aspect of living in our city. I would wake up each morning and there would be some teenager shot some other teenager, and I got sick of seeing that. In response to that, the city has seemingly adopted a curfew law, and I have the prosecutor explain to us what they're doing and how does this effectively reduce crime.
Well, thanks, Nate. I mean, I think the first thing that's important when we talk about the curfew law is everybody understand that it is not criminal, meaning no one's going to be sent to the Department of Correction because they violated the curfew law. It's what's known in juvenile court as a status offense. And so the remedies and the options are really limited in terms of what people can do. The biggest relief that it provides is that it gives law enforcement the opportunity, if there's someone out past curfew, whether they're 16 or 17 or potentially less than 16 years of age, there's different curfews that apply, that they can, take that kid and remove them from the street. They can't take them to jail. What they have to do is they have to reach out to their parent or guardian, try to connect with them, and then get them, off the street. And then if they want, they can petition a court and say, hey, we think this kid might benefit from services. And the judge is free to offer services or whatever they think is particular, could be potentially important for the kid. I would just point out to everybody is we've had a curfew law for the last 100 years. And the real issue with the curfew law is IMPD or any law enforcement agency's ability to enforce it. Because you just can't take kids to jail for violating the curfew. It requires a lot of manpower. It requires a lot of resources to scoop those kids up. You have to have a place where you can take them, and then you have to have a reunification center where you can get them reunited with their parents. And so, I would just caution people who see this as a solution to the problem that it's really limited in what it can do. It can really only take kids if they're out past curfew, that it allows the officers to do something to intervene, but that intervention is limited to calling their parents and potentially down the road get them involved in services. I think the other important part when we have conversations about curfew is we also need to have a conversation about what the actual issue is. And to me, the actual issue is too many kids have access to guns. And the reason they have access to guns is the fact that in Indiana, we have no gun laws. And when you repeal permitless carry, when you allow permitless carry and you allow everyone to walk around with a gun, you encourage everyone to walk around with a gun, it should come as no surprise that some of these guns end up in the hands of kids. And that's what we're seeing more and more. And so when we have conversations about the curfew law or youth violence, I think it's also important to acknowledge that the policy choices made by the Indiana legislature of encouraging everybody to have a gun have dramatically impacted youth violence because it's led to more kids having access to firearms. The other thing the legislature doesn't want to do is pass a safe storage law, which would make it easier for prosecutors to hold parents accountable when their kids did get access to guns if they're finding those guns in the home. So those are just a couple of thoughts on the curfew law, Nate.
I guess I'm seeing a difficulty with seeing what teeth do you have to enforce this law, Ryan. I don't know. What is the kid expecting? So you stop me on the streets 12 o'clock at night, you just cite me and let me go?
No, yeah. So what the police would have to do, they'd have to take that kid off the street, but they can't take him to jail. So they can take him to, they started a reunification site, and what they're going to do is they'll take him to that reunification site, and then they can contact
whatever you want, but it's a lockup or it's a keep from me being free, right? I mean, I'm restricted.
Right, 100%. But there's no bars. But you're definitely being taken there against your will.
Okay.
Yeah, and to me, that's not really a solution to the issue, and it also doesn't identify the bigger issue, which is too many kids have access to guns, regardless of what time of day it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know in Ohio, there's been a number of communities that have looked at, issues like that because of the issues of crime. And, many of us grew up with the rule that, hey, when the streetlights came on, hey, it's time to come home or be near your house. And unfortunately, those rules don't exist in as many households as they should. And I'd really encourage parents to really kind of think about, hey, is it safe or advantageous for your, underage child to be away from the home at all hours of the night? I think the other thing that I want to point out is there's really been a breakdown in society in terms of resources to keep children busy. Now we're seeing an eradication of after school programs, parks and recreation. That was a summer job for a lot of teachers that were off, where they would have a free lunch, they would have instruction regarding basketball, checkers, they would have various events, arts and craft. And we're really seeing a decline in resources in that regard, which I think is unfortunate. And the same with after school activities in terms of after school tutoring programs, even sports programs. We're seeing a decline in participation. So I think, again, exercising our right to vote and letting people know that these policy choices, in fact, have consequences.
Yeah, and the thing I would just add to that is, we cut like music programs at the same time we're having conversations about, curfew laws and why are kids out running the streets. To your point is it can't just be, hey, we're going to try to take every kid who's violating curfew, we're going to take him to the reunification center. Number one, I'm not sure that's practical, but number two, it doesn't address the underlying issue is why are these kids out in the first place? And, I would like to get more, let's be more outcome oriented. Let's identify what the actual problem is. And I think if we did that, we would have way more success than the success that we're going to see with the implementation of a curfew law.
Hey, well, how effective has our program been here in the city, Ryan? What I was concerned about is the rapid growth of the teen violence. I was watching in the morning time. I remember several months ago, it seemed like every day there was some shooting by teens. And so I want to know how effective this program is working and what else need to be done in order to reduce the teen violence issue that we're currently seeing.
Well, I think the first thing I need to point out is that a lot of this violence does not occur after the curfew. Some of the incidents that you're talking about, Nate, happened way before the curfew even would have been into effect. One of them happened at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And so again, like to me, this isn't addressing the actual problem. The actual problem is too many kids have access to guns. That's the problem. And that's a problem at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's a problem at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I think people like to distract and kind of take our eye off the ball in terms of what the actual problem is. But the problem is these kids have access to guns. And the problem is these kids think a good way to solve the problem is through guns. So much of what we see in terms of why kids are getting into arguments and fights and why things are resulting in gun violence directly goes back to what's posted online. Someone made a rap song about me. Someone said something terrible about me on social media. And that's what's driving this level of violence. And so, when kids think that this is a good way to solve their problems, that's going to be a real issue. But the bigger issue is why do they have access to these guns in the first place anyways?
May I ask Ryan a question, Nathaniel?
Go ahead.
What do you think this recent Supreme Court decision is going to do with gun situation in teenagers' hands? It's opened the door pretty much to you can carry it wherever you want. You don't need a proprietor's permission. Everybody's free to carry their little hip gun in their pocket to the park and run Marlon out of the park with it if he gets in their way.
Well, and what restrictions that are there for people who maybe have substance use disorders or other things? They've indicated a willingness that, everybody just needs to have a gun and everybody should have a gun. And that's entirely problematic for people in this community. And the reality is when you have the proliferation of guns, when guns are everywhere, guess what happens? There's a lot of people who are irresponsible with the gun. They leave them in unlocked cars where kids get their hands on them. They leave them around the house where kids get their hands on them. And what we see every single day is, Instagram, whatever your social media platform is, kids are buying and selling guns online. Yeah. And so they're getting way too easy access to these guns because they are everywhere. And the Supreme Court seems to be of the mindset of as long as people have access to guns, that's a good thing. I can tell you as prosecutor, it's not. Because the end result of that is more kids are going to get their hands on firearms.
A couple of years ago, I did some research on this. There are more guns in America than there are citizens.
Right.
Got the many more guns there are than there are individuals in this country. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
One thing I want to point out, I've been active in civil litigation on the gun violence my whole career. And what most people don't realize is that whenever we get these cases where teens have shot someone else, we actually sue the parents for negligent entrustment. In other words, if the parents don't have a process at their home where their weapons are being used by their teens to go out and shoot somebody, we hold the parents liable. They can be held liable civilly. And believe it or not, it's covered typically by their homeowner's insurance. So we've collected millions of dollars by filing claims against parents for their kids who engage in violence. And I don't think most people realize that. And because, it's been covered. And it's an esoteric type thing. Most people don't realize that they have coverage for your general liability on your homeowner's policy. If you have a homeowner's 3, homeowner's 5 policy, it will be covered in most cases. Intentional acts of the parents, it's not, but intentional acts of the kid by the parent negligent allowing the kids to get access to the gun because, but the other thing that Prosecutor Mears mentioned, of course, is that there's a high level of gun sales all everywhere. You can go to these gun shows, and is this correct, Prosecutor Mears? You can go to a gun show in Indiana. Do you have to have a certain age in order to purchase a gun?
So you have to be 18, but there's no requirement that you verify the person's age.
Well, Nate, I have a relative, young man that was ordering the equipment online, and he was making ghost guns for his friends, like in Maryland. So it's an epidemic of gun manufacturing and gun possession in this country. I don't think we're addressing that problem.
No, we're not. And what little protections that exist, the Supreme Court seems all too willing to pull back. It's an interesting time in terms of Supreme Court jurisprudence, in the sense of, they gutted the Voting Rights Act and basically said race doesn't matter anymore. And then without irony, a couple of days later, they say, well, race can be one of the things that you use to pull somebody over and see if you need to enforce immigration laws. And so we get these very conflicting messages from the Supreme Court, depending on, whether or not any particular case fits into kind of their view of who the law should and shouldn't protect.
Wow. How's the Marlon? Do you have the youth curfew laws in Cleveland area?
Yes, we do have them in certain areas because, youth crime, had increased quite a bit. And so we do have a number of those laws. But I would agree with our prosecutor. It's a tool that can be used because, in my view, kids under the age of 18 should not be out at all hours of the night. There should be some reasonable curfew, but there are so many issues that we have to look at if we really want to get to the root of the problem. And I agree that we do have to take a look at, the Supreme Court's jurisprudence as it relates to these gun laws. The Hawaii decision, I think your audience should really take a look at that. The court, basically calls themselves strict constructionists, but again, as some of the dissenting opinions pointed out, there was a history in Hawaii that indicated there could, in fact, be regulations. So, it's something that we really, have to discuss and really have to have a meaningful discussion as it relates to Supreme Court reform, in my view.
Well, here's the other issue then, Prosecutor Mears. Teen violence is like an adult activity in my mind. What are the factors? And I'm not advocating one way or another, but I'm just trying to see what is the right solution. And every time that someone gets shot and killed, there's a double tragedy. The family of the person who dies misses them. They can't go to high school graduation. They can't go to their wedding. They can't go to them graduating from college, and it goes on and on. On the other hand, the teenager that commits the crime may have vacated whatever future you might have. So what are the factors that lead to prosecution of teenagers as adults when they commit, say, pretty bad criminal misconduct versus, what do you do in order to try to reduce crime, have fair punishment to those type teenagers?
Well, I think the first thing is Indiana law really doesn't give us a lot of leeway. So if you're more than 16 years of age, so if you're 16 or 17 and you commit a murder, if you commit a robbery or other serious offenses, it has to be direct filed into adult court, meaning there's no option, there's no opportunity to file it in juvenile court. If the person's less than 16 years of age and they're involved in a murder or a robbery or something along those lines, then we go through what's known as the waiver process. And the waiver process is where a judge will get the child's educational background, criminal history, family history, psychological evaluation, all of those things, and try to make a determination as to whether or not the child would respond affirmatively to juvenile services or being kept in the juvenile system. And so a lot of times judges are left with that choice of making that evaluation. Hey, this kid's 14 or 15, they've been accused of a very serious crime. Doesn't make sense to keep them in juvenile. Would they respond to rehabilitative services that the juvenile court can offer? And so that's kind of the analysis that takes place. I think the problem that we have in Indiana, particularly as it relates with young people, is the juvenile courts lose jurisdiction over you once you hit a certain age. And so, you could be convicted of murder at 15 and you could easily be done with your sentence by the time you're 18, which is 3 years later, which I think a lot of people think is probably not sufficient under the circumstances. So the Indiana law, as it relates to juveniles, I think the process is not great. I think it's not great just, in the sense of if you're 16, it can be direct filed. I think there's some 16-year-olds who they could benefit through going through the waiver process of getting that evaluation from a psychologist, get all their school information, get all their information from their family background to kind of see, hey, is there an opportunity for this kid before we just send them into the adult system? But it's a real challenge. But as a prosecutor, you don't have a ton of options because once that child hits 16, they're going to adult court, regardless of what an evaluation might say. And then the waiver process for kids who are 14 or 15, a lot of times, if they don't get waived, it leads to outcomes that leaves the victim feeling like they weren't necessarily like they didn't receive justice because the timeline and the horizon of how long the juvenile court has jurisdiction over them is so limited.
I believe in California, Nate, in LA County especially, they call it a fitness hearing. If you're 16 or older and you're between 16 and 18, prosecution has to show that you're unfit for the services and the benefits in juvenile system. But I was just looking up the Los Angeles Municipal Code establishes a nighttime curfew, making it unlawful for minors under 18 to be in public or unsupervised places between 10 p.m. and sunrise. San Jose, San Diego got different curfews from 10 to 5 a.m. in the morning. San Diego is 10 to 6 a.m. in the morning. So there are those laws on the books in some of the counties here in California that a person between under 18 could be in violation of. But I don't think, and from my 51 years of being a trial lawyer and doing a lot of juvenile work at one time, I don't think I ever recall having a case where there was a charge of violation of the code for curfew. I don't think it's one of the codes that police enforce that readily unless there's a serious problem and it's called to their attention. But I don't think it's one of the big codes that's enforced that keep juveniles off the street and at home if they are under 18. And it's 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock in the evening is when I was a juvenile, was my time to leave home and get out. That's true.
Okay. Hey, what about this? What proactively can be done to prevent? I know we say that we have these no gun laws that restrict the sales, but what can the parents themselves do to assist in this process?
Not have guns in the house.
That part.
I'm sorry?
I was being ridiculous. I said not have guns in the house, but if you got a gun in the house and I want to get to it and you're a parent, I'm going to get that gun if I'm a juvenile, if I'm a kid. You can't hide it well enough. You can't lock it up well enough. If I want to get to it, I'm gonna get to it. It's accessible to me now, and that's common sense.
Yeah, I think parents should think long and hard about that. Because I think Milton makes a great point. There have been tragedies all over the country where children find a firearm and there's a tragedy that results from it. So it's something that you have to evaluate in terms of is it going to be a harm to your immediate family. And there's so many statistics out there that kind of bear out those points.
Yeah.
Attorney Lee, this is Renee. I think you have me in the call for some reason.
Go ahead, Renee.
I'm apologizing because I was on this call and I didn't know that you had put me in. Wow, you guys have opened up a can of worms. As a sociology major, I think this is bigger than a criminal court in the criminal system. This is an issue that stems back to leadership and a change in how we are as a family unit, so on and so forth. What I find is that and I'm in New York City, by the way, so it's a little bit different here. New York City, what we have is we have summer youth programs where kids can work jobs and make money. All kids in public schools are eligible for it. Most parents take advantage of it because they want their kids to be busy during the day when they're not working. So that's one way we kind of tackle youth violence during the summer when they're not in school. The other thing is that we do have truancy officers where if a kid is not in school and is out somewhere else, they do their best to, they contact the parents and try to do the best that they can to locate where that kid is and make sure they're not in trouble. But the other problem we have too is that when parents report kids missing, the police department does a few things, but they don't always do everything that they could possibly can because they're also hemmed up by laws. In other words, if a kid is reported missing and they're a certain age, New York City has given kids a little more rights than the parents at this point. So if the kids say they don't want to go back home, if they're a certain age, they can't really make them go back home. They can suggest, and the parent can't really do too much to like get them committed if they're having a mental health breakdown or something like that. So there's a lot of constraints with laws now, and it's just that the family dynamics have changed now where, you know, I'm an old school parent, and when I say that you're not going out, they don't go out. If I'm saying that I need to know where you are, they tell me where they are. But not every parent is equipped to do that because they're working one or two jobs. They're not home sometimes in the nighttime when their kid might be out because they have to bring money in. It's a lot of social dynamics that the criminal system doesn't address or cannot address or are not equipped. And it goes from state to state, even city to city and town to town. That's just my personal opinion.
Well, you made some good points. And I think that here in Indianapolis, we recognized this problem a long time ago, and we did have the summer job program. I'm not sure how effective that is now. Maybe Ryan could talk about that. I didn't follow up on that. Do we still have the citywide summer job program, Prosecutor Ryan?
We do, but it's not nearly as encompassing as it needs to be. And, you know, that's a real, to me, soft spot where we could make tremendous progress if we opened up that program to more people and got more people involved and engaged. I think it would have a profound impact on our community. So, I mean, we're talking about, you know, the summer job program currently has right around 300 jobs. That's not enough. And there's more that we can do to get young people engaged and working and being productive and really learning life skills that are ultimately going to benefit them and the community as they move forward. But that just isn't an area where we've seen much of an investment.
Well, that's very disappointing. 300. I mean, that's not a summer job program for a city. I mean, we used to have one bigger than that through the churches. I mean, I'm shocked that it's,
right.
Yeah, that's, go ahead, Marlon. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
Yeah, no, no worries. I think your audience, Nathaniel, really needs to understand that the whole goal behind a juvenile system is rehabilitative to stop individuals that could go into the adult system. And so, you know, we do need to, you know, look across the country and making sure that we're providing resources so that these, you know, children can make a turn and not become, you know, the future individuals that are in adult prison. The other thing too is that there's been great success in many programs around the country where there's wraparound services at our schools, because a lot of times our teachers aren't equipped to deal with a lot of the problems that the children are facing. Mental health issues, there's a lack of resources there, a lack of resources regarding issues regarding food security, housing. If we had those wraparound services, that would do a lot of good in terms of, you know, making sure that this net that's supposed to be our juvenile system actually works, in my view. And we've seen great examples of that. But again, we just need the resources and the political will to do so.
I think that's
Can
critical.
I say one last thing? This is Renee. I'm sorry. This is Renee. I'll hang up. I agree with you, Attorney Grimes, and And the reason why is because we don't have leadership at the top that the American people act a certain way. We don't have leadership
Hey, excuse me, Renee, we're losing your power's going down. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you say.
Okay, I'm sorry. I said last thing, and then I'm gonna hang up. I agree with Attorney Primes. We don't have enough leadership at the top. We see who's in the White House. We don't have leadership that is demanding this of Americans that they be accountable. We also don't have a Congress that is actually doing anything to get rid of all these guns that are on the street and enhance these regulations. That's a problem. If you don't have somebody that is telling the American people that this is who we are and this is how we should act, a lot of people don't think we need leadership, but we actually do. And if we don't have that, it's not going to trickle down into family members, household leaders, and all of that. And so everybody thinks this is the Wild Wild West now because the White House is acting like it's the Wild Wild West. That's my view, and I'm going to get off and let somebody else
Wait a
talk.
second,
Thank
Renee,
you so much for taking my
one
call.
thing, Renee,
Yeah.
one additional matter that kind of poked me in the eye. The Democrats socially beat Dan Goldman in New York City. I thought that was a mistake. Had the person
Yeah.
most knowledgeable about the crimes and stuff. Now we got somebody that you guys are going to elect, don't have a clue how to prosecute like Dan Goldman. I thought that was a mistake.
I personally don't think it's a mistake because I don't think people want Dan Goldman. I'm going to say this. I like him, but he was not efficient. Like some of the other Democrats that go up there and take big money and do very little. And he wasn't very efficient. Dan Goldman was in Congress when we could have done something about the gun laws. We could have done something about civil rights. He didn't push hard enough. He voted, but he didn't do enough to get other people over. I'm not saying the guy's a bad guy, but I have a problem with AIPAC money too. I'm just going to say that, and that's just my personal opinion.
Okay, I get it. Well, concluding comments for, I guess, go ahead. We have a couple more minutes. My big comment is that, each week we talk about voting, and I don't think that most people realize how significant your vote is this year. In the state of Texas, for example, I looked at the latest registration. They have 1.3 million more Democratic registered voters than Republican, yet Republican win. In Indiana, for example, out of our voting population, we're getting such a small percentage out of Marion County until we can't compete statewide. So I don't want anybody to make excuses. From this day forward, start regularly calling your friends, your neighbors, and make sure that we get a system in place whereby we're holding each other accountable so we can have a 95% voter participation this fall. Go ahead, the next person.
Nate, the one thing I would say, like if voting wasn't that important, they wouldn't have just gutted the Voting Rights Act. And to me, it just goes to show the importance of your vote. And so if people, whoever says their vote doesn't matter, well, they spend a lot of time, money, effort, and energy to make sure people can't vote and make it harder for people to vote. The other thing I'll say, just as it relates to young people, everybody thinks discipline's about punishment. Discipline's not about punishment. Discipline's about how can we help change behavior. And so when we have these conversations about youth violence and other things, the conversation has to be centered around what can we do to try to help change behavior. And let's be honest about what the problem is. And the problem is too many kids have access to guns.
Marlon, Milton.
Well, I mean, there's an old saying, pay me now or pay me later. And I think, for our society's point of view, investing the money with our youth in terms of having strong juvenile programs to redirect children so they're not part of the adult system, having the after school and wraparound services are really important that we've mentioned today. And a lot of that spins from people being informed about the effectiveness of these programs and exercising the right to vote.
Well, I appreciate Marlon saying earlier about the wraparound programs, et cetera, in these juvenile systems, but I had a case once where the judge brought all of the people engaged in the wraparound. It was 8 different people in different things with this kid, and 7 of them wasn't doing doo-doo. They were not fulfilling their responsibility. And that's it was kind of a laissez-faire attitude like we have in teaching now in some areas where people just want to check and they're not concerned with the delivery of their service. So it's a lot of work to do overall in providing for our society.
Well, thank you. And thank you, audience. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to all our callers today. And next week is the 4th of July weekend, so we're off. And so join us back on, I think, July 11th or the second Saturday in July. So thank you all for calling in. Thank you for supporting our show. And don't forget, go out and motivate someone else to vote. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Enjoy your trip, Marlon. I'm envious.
Okay. Okay. Take care, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Everybody have a good one.
All right,
Bye now.